So if you're anything like me and you're excited that MGS4 is finally escaping the clutches of the PlayStation 3, but you just cannot wait for the official release and don't want to sit around for another few months, then yes, emulation is still an option right now. That said, before we get into anything, I want to give you a quick word of warning and some realistic expectations, as well as maybe a disclaimer, however you may see it. You are probably not going to get a flawless, crash-free locked 60 FPS at 4K throughout the entire game, unless you've got a seriously powerful CPU. And that's important to say upfront because MGS4 is one of the most demanding games on RPCS3. Even the current RPCS3 MGS4 wiki page makes it clear this is still a very heavy game to emulate and still relies on specific fixes and workarounds. So if you follow this video through to the end and you use my settings, whatever else, it's still recommended that you visit the RPCS3 wiki for MGS4, which I'll link in the description, and then use any tweaks or fixes they may provide. Now, I honestly do not know what kind of black magic this game is using under the hood, but I spent what I felt like an entire workday testing settings, patches, and different configurations. And on my i9 9900K, I still could not get a fully stable 60 FPS throughout the game. And that is worth mentioning because this same CPU handles a lot of other demanding titles through emulation at perfectly decent frame rates. For example, just last year, I got Bloodborne to work at a near stable 60 FPS and it runs great. It runs better than MGS4 does for me. So this is kind of a testament to how intense this game can be. But you know, emulation does not scale the same way normal PC games do. It is just not a case of good GPU will equal good performance, and RPCS3 especially, a lot of this comes down to the CPU performance, and more specifically how well your CPU handles this kind of workload. Now, with that said, a stable 30 FPS capped experience is an absolutely doable thing, and honestly for a lot of people watching this, probably the best way to go. It's going to be the sweet spot in my opinion, and if you want, you can always pair that with something like lossless scaling or smooth motion if your GPU supports it, to get a few extra, you know, frames, or, you know, just get some visual motion clarity, right? And if you happen to have a stronger or newer processor, then yes, there is a much better chance that you can push closer to a stable 60. But I think it is important that we set these expectations now before we start changing settings, pretending this is going to run like a native PC port. The hindsight is, it's not. A lot of videos that I see on YouTube and guides will market this as a smooth, stable 60 FPS, way more than 60 FPS. But if you look deep under the hood, you will see there are frame drops, and you know, it's not perfect, but it is what it is, and this is what we'll have to make do with for now. And this is also my personal experience, so you know, you might find that you get better results or experience than I do, and that is totally okay. So with that out of the way, let's actually get into the setup. First, you're going to want to download RPCS3 and get the emulator itself set up, install the firmware, get everything configured, and honestly, on the newer versions, it's all pretty straightforward and self-explanatory. You just install RPCS3. The moment you install it and boot it up, you'll be prompted to install the firmware. After that, one thing I personally recommend is adding RPCS3 as a non-Steam game in Steam. It just makes life easier, especially when it comes to controller detection and controller input, and my experience saves a lot of messing around later. There was a time where RPCS3 wouldn't detect my PS5 pad. I connected it with Steam, I added it as a non-Steam game, and then Steam input overrode that and it worked absolutely fine afterwards. So you might find that it helps you. Next, you want to get your own legitimate copy of MGS4 ready to use with the emulator. You know, a wise man once said, if you Google the name of a certain game with .iso at the end, you get what you were looking for. Now, once that is done, the next step is getting the actual settings right. And these are the settings I would recommend for a good balance between image quality and performance. So I'll display these settings on the screen for each tab so you can kind of see what I'm working with. Resolution scale, I recommend starting off with 100% to begin with. I know that this is not the sexiest option in the world, but trust me, if you start chasing 4K before you even know how the game runs, like I did, you're not going to have a good time and you're just making your life harder. So once everything's up and running and stable, then I recommend you start experimenting with higher scaling and higher resolutions. In the patch manager, make sure you select the unlock FPS patch. Make sure it's enabled if you're attempting to go beyond 30 FPS. Now, the good news is that in RPCS3, most normal patches are very easy now. The first time you open the patch manager, you can just download the latest patch list automatically, tick what you need, save, and you're basically good to go. So for the most part, it is really just as close to click and play as possible. There is also another thing worth mentioning here, and that is the canary patch or canary patch fix for MGS4. The current RPCS3 MGS4 page specifically says the crash fix canary patch should be enabled and notes that canary patches like this need to be added manually and then enabled through RPCS3 patch manager. There is also a separate flickering textures canary patch listed. If you run into that problem, in my case though, I actually did not end up needing the crash fix patch because the game ran fine without it. So I would treat it more like a backup fix to keep in mind rather than something you absolutely must use from the beginning. If the game's behaving great, that's fine. But if it starts crashing a lot, that's probably the first thing I would try. So keep the canary patch in mind. I'll post a link to that in the description as well. Now, during gameplay, you're going to run into shader compilation. It's just how RPCS3 kind of, compiles things. It's a very normal thing, so it means you're going to get stutter, frame drops, and occasional hitches, while the emulator is compiling effects it has not seen before. Kind of like, we had that whole craze on PC a few years ago with shader compilation not being a thing and games running like shit. So, yeah. RPCS3's default settings also know that async multi-threaded shader model is generally recommended, which helps reduce the worst of that old school shader stutter that we don't really like. So it will help, but it won't make the thing disappear entirely. So just be prepared to experience that the first time around you see effects pop up like dust or shoot a gun or something like that. And yes, there are also times when RPCS3 can still crash out of nowhere, and with MGS4 specifically, that is not exactly unusual. Now, one thing worth mentioning is when you first boot up the game, it's going to do the PPU compilation, and it's going to take a really, really fucking long time, like it did for me, and it's going to batter your processor like it did mine. My processor ran at about 90 to 100% for about an hour whilst PPU stuff was being processed. Now, this is a one-time thing. It only has to run one time when you boot the game, but it does take some time, so just keep that in mind. If it looks like it freezes or crashes or something, don't panic. If in your case, like in mine, it stops responding for like a long amount of time, you can close it or restart the emulator and then try running the game again. Ultimately, if that fails and you still can't get it to boot, just dump the cache. If you right click the game, and there are some options to actually just clear out the cache. Now, with these settings, I had a mostly stable experience overall. I didn't play it for too much, but I played for about 3 hours while skipping cutscenes, and I did not run into consistent crashes personally, which was honestly better than I expected and better than when I last tried it a couple years ago. I did get the occasional texture flicker here and there, and performance was definitely not perfect, but in terms of actually getting into the game and playing it, this was more than usable. So no, this is not a perfect solution, and no, it's not going to feel like some miracle native remaster. But if you've been dying to replay MGS4 or even play it and you do not want to be chained to the PS3, this is absolutely the right way to go about it right now until we get the official port for MGS4. So yeah, by all means, go ahead and give it a try. If you have some spare time to kill, or if you're just bored out of your mind and you love these games as much as I do, then yeah, this is something I highly recommend, but obviously just manage your expectations about performance and how the game's going to look and run, because it's not always going to be a smooth, stable experience. Now, with that out of the way, thank you for watching the video, and I hope it helps. And if you do have any questions in the comments, or you're struggling to get the game running or have some problems, I'll do my best to reply to as many comments as I can and offer as much of my help as I can as well. So peace and thanks very much.